Good evening, friends. Stephen Benoon with Israeli News Live. And Russia has launched a massive missile strike into Ukraine. But this is not really the reason why we're talking here today. We're going to be talking about the Azov Battalion, is what we're going to be talking about with you guys. And we're going to go into the connection of the Azov Battalion. That's the purpose and focus of this particular broadcast this evening. But I already did a little live broadcast on the situation inside of Ukraine right now, where Russia has launched, some are saying, up to 100 missiles into Ukraine, a response there, and of course claiming that one of those missiles have actually hit inside of Poland. Now, this was actually, let's just see what the latest is now. That's what we want to look for here, because I was... let me just see what we might have here. Oh gosh, they're showing some shrapnel. This one right here, though, the Guardian is showing is this little bitty pothole. I call it a pothole. I mean, I know it's not technically a pothole. It does hit. It looks like, I don't know, almost like a train track, but it's not a train track, because that's just some kind of little wagon being pulled behind a tractor. So the tractor cart itself, I would say, is probably roughly about anywhere from 15 to 20 foot in length. And that's about the size of the hole that's there on the ground. And as I said in the broadcast live a while ago, here is a real hole created by a cruise missile. As you could see, you could park the dump truck, you could park the little backhoe, the excavator. You could park all three of them into that hole. And that would be a little bit more accurate. 25 meters or about 70 foot across in diameter would be more accurate. So when I looked at that, it was really suspicious, right? But then Hal Turner, though, is also putting out, this is not the one I'm looking for here, but on his broadcast, unconfirmed reports that Russia used a type of bunker buster, which would be a nuclear type of weapon, and has killed all of the Ukrainian Army general staff that were underground. And so if that's the case, that is going to definitely cause NATO to enter into this conflict. And I have shared with you guys over and over and over, you're going to see some major changes here by the end of December. You're going to see NATO possibly enter into this war. There was going to be a false flag event that would help bring NATO into this battle. And I'm just very concerned that we are now at that particular situation there going on right now. So anyway, by the way, this is also interesting too. I'd actually prepared this as a different part of the broadcast for Western weapons. The Ukraine war is a beta test. Everybody's been using it as a beta test, including Russia. Russia's been watching the U.S. use all their high-tech stuff out there on the field. And Russia's not used theirs per se, but they are definitely monitoring it, sharing that information with China, letting China know what the U.S. technology really is. So I want to kind of share that too there. We're going to get into the really interesting things, though, now. I want to get into that. I want to close some of these windows down because I got way too many open there. You guys already know about Hal Turner, how to find Hal Turner. So that way, this is something I thought was interesting too. I have to go back to that later, maybe on a Patreon broadcast with you guys about these craft around the sun. Anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Counterpunch. This is what caught my attention. Ukraine's Azov Battalion, neo-Nazis, or Russian propaganda. So I got curious. What's on this website, right? The infamous Ukrainian right-wing extremist Azov Battalion was founded on the 5th of May of 2014 in the in the port city of Berdyansk, in the Zaporizhia Oblast province in southeastern Ukraine near the Sea of Azov, hence its name. In other words, the Azov Battalion. Goes on, says initially was set up as a voluntary militia in the turmoil of the Euromaidan protest and subsequent political instability of the country. Azov rose to prominence, and Azov men operated against the illegal armed intrusion by Russia into Donbass and Crimea. The co-founder and first leader of the Azov Battalion, is a Ukrainian, Andrei Belsky. Now, I find his name interesting, by the way, Andrei Belsky. Actually, that's not him there. This is him right here. Andrei Belsky right here, Ukrainian young man. But a Ukrainian man that is Jewish, actually. And that's one of the reasons why I have the movie Defiance up here. Daniel Craig played the Belarusian Jewish liberator of the Jewish people from the death camps during World War II. And of course, his name was Tuvia Bielski, is who the character that Daniel Craig plays in the movie Defiance. An amazing story. And I always found that Tuvia Bielski was truly a Jewish man trying to rescue the Jewish people from the Nazis trying to kill them. And there are many good people like him. But then you have this other groups out here, like in the case of Mr. Andrei Belsky. And they do spell the name technically a little differently, only because Tuvia Bielski has an IE, I believe, in his name there. But pronounced the same, means the same, and of course may even be related as far as that goes there, because you're dealing with two countries that border one another. That would be Belarus and Ukraine. But anyway, this is the Belsky that actually formed the Azov Battalion, and it became a white supremacist neo-Nazi group. But it doesn't just end with him. And that's the disturbing thing when you go through this article right here. So at the time, he was a 35-year-old graduate of the history faculty at the National University of the Eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. Yet previously, he was highly active in Ukraine's far-right circles and had been a leader of several right-wing extremist micro-parties, including the political party called the Patriot of Ukraine, which has been said to have merged into the Azov Battalion in 2014. Now, as I said, though, he's not the only Jewish guy in behind these things. You had, as it says here, on the 2nd of September 2014, the business oligarch and then president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, awarded him the Dashi Order for Valor from 2014 to 2019. And Belsky was a member of the Ukrainian parliament and Verkhovna Rada. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, and I'm trying to think of his name. Actually, you know what? I think we're subscribed to him. Well, I cannot, for the life of me, remember that guy's name. He was a rabbi, and I'm going to have comments open where you guys can, maybe somebody could post this for me to remind me. He was a Chabad rabbi that had converted, he became a Christian later, but he also was exposing the involvement of, or really exposing this connection to the overthrow of Ukraine. He exposed what the Chabad movement was doing, how that they were working on putting Jewish people, leaders, into power throughout Ukraine, and in order to overthrow the country and to have the Russians act like they're taking back Ukraine, have the Ukrainians feel like they're defending with their life to save the country. And he really goes into all of that and exposes what that agenda was. And for the life of me, I cannot remember the guy's name. I don't know why I went blank on it. Anyway, so moving on, let's continue on, though. In the article here, though, it goes on to speak about, besides Andrei Belsky, we get a little further down. It says, but they were necessary to prevent the police from putting down the protest, talking about the Azov Battalion. It says, Andrei Belsky, the original commander of the Azov unit from May through October of 2014, was also a co-founder, active member, 2008 to 2016, of Ukraine's far-right Social National Assembly that subscribes to a neo-fascist ideology. Anyway, initially the militia group was largely privately funded, but soon started to receive support from Ukrainian government. One of the main supporters in financial terms is considered to be the Ukrainian billionaire and oligarch of the Jewish descent, Igor Klamansky, another, as it says here, Jewish descent man. He's not only Jewish descent, but he is a major backer of the Chabad Lubavitch organization, of Jewish organizations, etc. He was giving them 400 euros per month for the Azov fighters there. All right, so let's move on. Now, U.S. House admits the Nazi role in Ukraine. Now, I'm going to come back here to Klamaski here in just a moment here. But I want to first, before I do that, I want to read to you a little bit about how that the U.S. House of Representatives recognized the Nazi role in Ukraine. The U.S. House of Representatives has admitted an ugly truth that the U.S. mainstream media has tried to hide from the American people, that the post-coup regime in Ukraine has relied heavily on a Nazi stormtroopers to carry out its bloody war against the ethnic Russians, which was a report done by Robert Perry. Goes on to say, what the Times didn't tell its readers was that these heroes were Nazis, some of them even wearing the swastikas and the SS symbol. Another thing here, Republican-controlled U.S. House of Representatives has just voted unanimously to bar U.S. assistance going to the Azov Battalion because of its Nazi ties. When even the hawkish House of Representatives can't stomach these Nazi stormtroopers who have served as Kiev's tip of the spear against the ethnic Russian population of eastern Ukraine, what does that say about the honesty and integrity of the New York Times when it finds these same Nazis so admirable? Yeah, isn't that the truth, right? Yet on June the 10th, the U.S. House of Representatives approved a bipartisan amendment to the Defense Appropriation Acts of Representatives John Conyers Jr., Democrat, Michigan, and Ted Yoho, Republican, Florida, that would block U.S. training of the Azov Battalion and would prevent transfer of shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles to fighters in Iraq and Ukraine. Finally, they did something right? Anyway, Ukraine's Interior Minister, Arsen Avakov, who oversees Ukraine's armed militias, announced that the Azov troops would be among the first units to be trained by the 300 U.S. military advisors who have been dispatched to Ukraine, a training mission codenamed Fearless Guardian. I'm going to back up and read a little bit more of that, though. Let's just read the in-betweens that I didn't highlight. I am grateful that the House of Representatives unanimously passed the amendment last night to ensure that our military does not train members of this repulsive neo-Nazi Azov Battalion, along with the measures to keep the dangerous and easily trafficked manpads out of the unstable regions, said Conyers on Thursday. He describes Ukraine's Azov Battalion as a 1,000-man volunteer militia in the Ukraine National Guard that Foreign Policy magazine has characterized as openly neo-Nazi and fascist, and Azov is not some obscure force. Ukraine's Interior Minister, Arsen Avakov, who oversees Ukraine's armed militias, announced that Azov troops would be among the first units to be trained by the 300 U.S. military advisors who have been dispatched to Ukraine in a training mission codenamed Fearless Guardian. So it didn't really matter that Congress had disapproved it. We did it anyway. It says here, on Friday, Bloomberg News article by Leonid Bershitsky noted that it is easy to see why Conyers, who would have a problem with military unit commanded by Ukrainian legislator Andrei Bielski, Conyers is founding member of the Congressional Black Caucuses. Bielski is a white supremacist. Can you blame the guy, though? Bielski had run Patriot of Ukraine, the precursor of the Azov Battalion, since 2005. And in a 2010 interview, he described the organization as a nationalist storm troops. The group's ideology was social nationalism, a term Bielski, a historian, knew would deceive no one. In 2007, Bielski railed against a government decision to introduce fines for racist remarks. So why the Negro love on legislative level? They want to break everyone who has risen to defend themselves, their family, their right to master their own land. They want to destroy the national biological resistance to everything alien and to do us what happened to the old Europe, where the immigrant hordes are a nightmare for the French, Germans, and Belgians, where cities are blackening fast and crime and drug trade are invading even the remotest corners. That's a quote that he made. Right? So this is the type of guy you got in there. The 400-strong Azov Battalion became part of the National Guard, receiving permission to expand to 2,000 fighters and gaining access to heavy weaponry. So what if some of its members had Nazi symbols tattooed on their bodies, and the unit's banner bore the wolf's angel used widely by the Nazis during World War II? In an interview with Ukraine's Focus magazine last September, Avkov, responsible for the National Guard, was protective of his heroes. He said the wolf's angel in many European cities is part of the city's emblem. Dropping down to the yellow highlighted part, may God allow anyone who criticizes them to be 10% of what they have done. Anyone who's going to tell me that these guys preach Nazi views, wear swastikas, and so on are barefaced liars and fools. They even go around doing Nazi salutes. Is this guy a complete, idiot or what? I'm thinking of all kinds of descriptive names to say, but I held it back a little bit. But though it played down in most Western news media, is often dismissed as Russian propaganda to even remotely say the idea that the Azov Battalion are a bunch of neo-Nazis, right? Based on interviews with militia members, the Telegraph reported that some of the fighters doubted the reality of the Holocaust, expressed admiration for Adolf Hitler, and acknowledged that they are indeed Nazis. Bielski, the Azov commander, is also head of an extremist Ukrainian group called the Social Nationalist Assembly, which we already brought out. And according to the Telegraph article, which quoted a commentary by Bielski as declaring the historic mission of our nation is this critical moment is to lead white races of the world in a final crusade for their survival, a crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. In other words, for the first time since World War II, a government had dispatched Nazi stormtroopers to attack a European population, and officials in Kiev knew what they were doing. And the bad thing is, Mr. Bielski is Jewish. You know, the one guy that should know the difference, right? But he doesn't. Yeah, he does. He does know the difference. The Consortium News, let's go on to read a little bit more. Exclusive throughout the Ukraine crisis, the U.S. State Department and mainstream media have downplayed the role of the neo-Nazis in the U.S.-backed Kiev regime. And an inconvenient truth that is surfacing again as a right-wing stormtroopers fly neo-Nazi banners as they attack the East, Robert Perry reports. And this is part of the report by Robert Perry. The New York Times reported almost in passing on Sunday the Ukrainian government's offensive against ethnic Russian rebels in the East and has unleashed far-right paramilitary militias that have even raised a neo-Nazi banner over conquered town of Marinka just west of the rebel stronghold of Donetsk. That might seem like a big story, a U.S.-backed military operation which has inflicted thousands of mostly civilian casualties as being spearheaded by neo-Nazis, but the consistent pattern of the mainstream U.S. news media has been since the start of the Ukraine crisis to white out a roll of Ukraine's brown shirts. That's really what it comes down to, but it doesn't end there, and this is some of the things I need to get into with you. Ihor Kolomoisky is who we're going to start talking about here pretty quick here, because who is he? And this is Veterans Today. They had a report called Biden directly funded by Azov. Zelensky founder, Israeli citizen, Kolomoisky, another Jewish guy. I mean, this is like, blows me away when I read these things, right? So, Kolomoisky, right? He is Biden, President Joe Biden, not just President Joe Biden. No, we really should say Hunter Biden, but directly underneath his father, Hunter Biden. He's the one, really the benefactor. That's why they got Hunter Biden's picture here. This is Kolomoisky right here. Of course, everybody knows who Zelensky is, the little pretender there to the right. Says here, the real person who was the benefactor to and boss of Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, at the Ukraine gas company Burisma Holdings, was not the CEO of Burisma Holdings, Mykola Zlotovsky, another Jewish guy, but it was instead Ihor Kolomoisky, who was part of the newly installed Ukrainian government, which the Obama administration itself had actually just installed in Ukraine, and what the head of the private CIA firm Stratford correctly called the most blatant coup in history. Now, those of you might remember the Maidan coup of 2014. We had several figures that were going over there. One of those, of course, was George Soros. Another, in fact, I've been told that George Soros was the one that groomed for decades there the youth of Ukraine, preparing them for this very moment. Another key prominent figure that went over there was John McCain. And then we had one other senator there. I know I got his face in my mind. I just can't think of his name right offhand. It'll come to me here in a little bit there. And these were the guys that were helping to bring about the demise of the country. But they were the face, like John McCain was the face of Ukraine, whereas in behind the scenes, Hunter Biden was working on the embezzlement deals. This all, by the way, happens to be after the collapse of the Soviet Union. This is where these oligarchs all got into power, siphoning off billions of dollars from the former Soviet Union. Anyway, it goes on to say, shortly after the Obama administration's Ukraine coup, March 2nd, 2014, Kolomoisky, who supported Yanukovych's overthrow, was appointed the governor of, and I can't pronounce this very well, Dnipropetrovsk, Ukraine. Hunter Biden, with no experience in the industry or region, would join Kolomoisky's Burisma Holdings 2 months later on May 12th of 2014. A 2012 study of Burisma Holdings done in Ukraine by the Anti-Corruption Action Center, an investigative nonprofit co-founded by American billionaire George Soros. Can you believe that? Investigative nonprofit co-founded by American billionaire George Soros. And they're the ones going to be doing the anti-corruption action on the Burisma Holdings. What a joke. You serious? George Soros is the one behind that organization. He's just there to make sure they cover up all their crimes, to keep Biden out of the hot spot. Anyway, the U.S. State Department found that the true owner of Burisma Holdings was none other than Ukrainian billionaire oligarch Ihor Kolomoisky. They knew that. I mean, George Soros is friends with the guy. I mean, this is what's so laughable. The study, which funded to dig up corruption on Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, instead found that Ihor Kolomoisky managed to seize the largest reserves of natural gas in Ukraine. Yes, and Hunter Biden, all of them got to be the benefactors of that. I don't have time to go into reading all these, so I'm going to post these articles for you guys in the comments below there. Let me play a little clip here for you from this video here. I forget why I had it up here, but let's play a little bit.
Traded on any stock exchange. It's very difficult to get information on what exactly its finances look like. But for starters, the group owns Ukraine's largest TV operator, 1+1 Media Group, which controls 95% of Ukraine's TV. Other groups' ownership and stakes include Ukraine's largest commercial bank, Privatbank, one of the country's largest oil refineries, Ukrnafta, and Halchinya, Biola soft drinks company. The group also controls electricity plants in 5 states known as Oblast in Ukraine. The group also owns many steel companies. In USA, the group owns various buildings and are the largest holder of real estate in downtown Cleveland. The group portfolio includes 1 Cleveland Center and 55 Public Square. The group previously owned Huntington Bank Building and the Penton Media Building. Ihor Kolomoisky has Ukrainian, Israeli, and Cypriot passports. Even Ukrainian law forbids dual citizenship. One journalist, Serhiy Andrishko, questioned about his triple Ukraine, Israel, Cyprus citizenship. He replied, "In the Constitution it says dual citizenship is forbidden, but triple citizenship is not forbidden."
Is that not fascinating or what, right? I mean, I'm blown away by it. Controversial Ukrainian oligarch Igor Kolomoisky banned from the U.S. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken accuses Jewish tycoon of corruption, undermining democracy. There he is right there. He's been Boy, they've got some very colorful words for him. Oh, the door closed. 1 second, guys. Oh, gosh. So that, let's see, I don't think I had anything really highlighted other than that, just to kind of give you that little bit of background on him right there. Did Biden ask the State Department to lift Kolomoisky's travel ban? This was interesting as well. Kolomoisky's company, Burisma, was implicated in a money laundering ring, and Hunter Biden, then knowing this, goes to work for him a few weeks later. The State Department then lifts a travel ban because of Joe Biden asked for it. And then a few months after that, Vice President Biden and John Kerry lobbied for $1.8 billion to be delivered directly into his bank, and that just goes proof. I mean, the corruption just never seems to end, right? And it's funny because one of the things that I was told back before Russia invaded, and this was trying to help to stop the invasion of Russia coming into Ukraine, was to expose all the illegal activity that was going on between Hunter Biden and all this Ukrainian gas that was being stolen and stuff, and the kickbacks that were being paid to him in the millions. But we just never could get all that exposed, so we kind of got stuck on that. Anyway, this article right here, who is Ukrainian billionaire Ihor Kolomoisky? So I just highlighted a few things in here for you. He is like a man with Tourette's. Even if he likes you, he will curse you and your mother throughout the entire conversation. He can kick you out of the room without a hesitation. That's one of those people that are sitting there talking to you normally, and then all of a sudden they go, "What do you want?" They kind of do like that. That's what they're talking about. That's Tourette's. Ihor Kolomoisky was born into a Ukrainian Jewish family similar to the one President Vladimir Zelensky. He is a strong supporter of the Jewish community, active in several national, international organizations, and in 2010, Kolomoisky visited the European Council of Jewish Communities in Berlin and started to make close ties with the organization, deciding he would donate at least $14 million over the span of 5 years. He bonded with the president of the organization, Jonathan Joseph, convincing him to name Kolomoisky as the new president, reports the Jewish Community Voice. And it actually happened. He became the head, something that normally the board would actually choose. They would vote on the new head, the new leader. And at the time, it was actually Jonathan Joseph who was the president. I'm wondering how many millions he must have got for just making sure that Kolomoisky became the president. It's a very weird situation that happened there. Let me kind of show you what happens. This is it right here. Oligarchs take over the European Jewish group, highlights the tensions. And this is what I mean by not all Jewish people. I mean, there's a lot of Jewish people that realize that these Jews that are taking over and running a bunch of neo-Nazis over in Ukraine are very much have got a very weird thing going on. In this picture right here, right? You know what these guys are doing right here? They're popping vodka shots. Let me see if I can blow that up for you. I don't know how big we can make it. There we go. There's Kolomoisky right there, popping some vodka shots there with Jonathan Joseph, the rabbi, at the time. Just so you can see that for yourself. Now, it goes on to say here, instead of they were downing vodka shots with Israel's chief rabbi, that was the chief rabbi in the basement of Berlin's gleaming Chabad Center. Notice, though, it's at the Chabad Center. And this is not going to be the only time you're going to see Chabad mentioned in there. And remember, as Menachem Schneerson that had wrote about this overthrow of Ukraine. They wanted to overthrow Ukraine and kill as many Russians and as many Slavic people as they possibly could in this whole battle. So I would say this even to those that might be members of the Azov Battalion. They only have you there to kill you off. Yeah, your leaders are Jewish, like Bielski, like, the billionaire here, but they don't care about you whatsoever. One of the two billionaires, banking magnate Igor Kolomoisky, who with $2 billion in assets, ranks number 488 in Forbes magazine 2010 list of the world's richest people, had just been named the new president of the host organization, the European Council of Jewish Communities. He was awarded position after committing to give the organization an annual multi-million euro gift for 5 years, at least 14 million. Depending on whom one talked to, the appointment was either a generous lifeline to a cash-strapped organization focused on social welfare and education, or a hostile takeover group with an important-sounding name. I would say it's a hostile takeover. I don't know about you guys. This is not a democratic process, Arturo Tedeschi, an EJCJ board member from Italy, told JTA. It took place like a Soviet-style takeover. Oligarchs who made their fortunes as capitalists emerged from the Soviet collapse are swooping in to take over the leadership of several key European Jewish organizations. Yes, they are. Giant Moshe Kantor, which you're going to also find out is another big Chabad member supporter, number 773 on the Forbes list with a net worth of $1.3 billion, was elected president of the European Jewish Congress, and Alexander Mishkovich Kazakh, who has appeared on Forbes list and is in the metals and gas business, has the Euro-Asian Jewish Congress, and Ukrainian Vadim Rabinovich, another oligarch and media mogul, is vice president of ECJC. They're not just taking over Ukraine. They're taking over all the Jewish leadership positions, organizations. Here's Moshe Kantor. I mentioned him just a second ago. UK sanctions Russia billionaire over ties to Putin. The Russian billionaire Moshe Kantor, who was sanctioned by the UK government on Wednesday, has long cultivated deep ties with British politicians and establishment figures, including Tony Blair and Prince Charles. But in Europe, Kantor is best known as the holder of one of the Jewish community's most high-profile roles, president of the European Jewish Congress. Interesting. The Kantor Center, which billionaire founded in Israel, has condemned Putin's invasion of Ukraine. But you'll also find out, as the article stated, they put ties on him. They put sanctions on him due to his ties with Putin. So how could he be condemning Putin over the war if they're putting sanctions on him because they're his ties with Putin? That seems weird, right? He also organized the World's Holocaust Forum, which marked the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz death camp, attended in Jerusalem by Prince Charles, Macron, the U.S. Vice President, Mike Pence, and Putin. Wow. Maybe Putin is also part of this. Remember, Putin is very much a part of the Chabad organization as well. And here we go right here. What do we have here? Gennady Bohoyabov was also accused in the scheme, and he's another Chabad Lubavitch of UK member, right? Wow. Gets crazier by the moment. The deeper you look. Ukrainian oligarch with ties to Trump's impeachment, accused by the Justice Department of stealing billions from the bank he once owned and laundering the stolen cash to build a business empire in the U.S. There you go. Ukrainian oligarch. His key role in the events that spurred President Trump's impeachment last year has been accused by the Justice Department of stealing billions of dollars from the bank he once owned. Wow, I wonder who they could be talking about, right? The two men were majority owners of the private bank before it was nationalized in 2016 in response to the fraud. The men used the bank as their own personal account to build a business property empire in the U.S. and Justice Department. They're talking about oh gosh, how do you say his name again? Too many names for me to keep up with there. Kolomoisky. Not only Kolomoisky, but they're also talking about the other billionaire, Moshe Kantor. And remember, Kolomoisky is the one who is funding the Azov Battalion inside of Ukraine. I'm just showing you who he is and what he does and the little nasty trail behind him. The two men were majority owners of the private bank before it was nationalized in 2016. In response to the fraud, the men used the bank of their own personal account to build a business and property empire in the U.S. and the Justice Department, according to what the Justice Department said. And there he is again. Right. Anyway, Kolomoisky and Bohoyalabov reportedly used their status as owners to repeatedly request money from the bank, which they would then move through a vast network of shell companies to thoroughly disguise their nature, source, ownership, and control. And among their purchases were more than 5 million square feet of commercial real estate in Ohio, steel plants in Kentucky, West Virginia, Michigan, and cell phone manufacturing plant in Illinois, and commercial real estate in Texas. Good old Chabad Lubavitch boys, right? Interesting. He made a fortune in the wake of, can't see behind that, Soviet Union's collapse, amassing assets from airlines to financial institutions known by the nickname of Binya. He also crafted a larger-than-life image for himself, even keeping a shark aquarium in his office. Now that is Mr. Kolomoisky who did that. All right, just to give you some little details there. Let's continue forward there. Ukrainian corruption, our crooked politicians, and the Jewish agenda. Wow. The denazifying of Ukraine. At times like these that I'm glad that when the government told me that radical Muslims hijacked airplanes and flew them into the buildings on 9/11, I dug a little deeper and found out that was a big lie. Today I heard Fox anchor weigh in on Putin's mental stability without once mentioning our dementia-ridden commander-in-chief, his former boss Barack Obama, and our mendacious media are responsible for what is taking place in Ukraine today, and a whole slew of U.S. politicians have a lot to hide there. The truth is Yanukovych was a little too pro-Russia to suit Obama and some of the EU pals, so Mr. Obama conspired with several EU countries and the state of Israel to foment a coup to take out Yanukovych, which he refused to sign a certain political and trade agreements. And Obama sent his Jewish Undersecretary of State, Victoria Nuland, to Ukraine, who later admitted that Obama administration spent $5 billion to destabilize Ukraine before the Maidan protest. What do you know? Nuland was famously recorded saying, well, F the EU, while talking with the U.S. Jewish ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, when he told her that the EU would want some input in choosing Ukraine's next president. When Jewish billionaires forced the duly elected president to flee his country or be murdered and then hand picks of Jewish puppets to be a new president, that is not democracy. No, it's not. Clearly, it's not democracy. Couldn't agree even more. I'm going to play this little clip right here, too. We actually played this clip a little while back, but I ran across it again, so I wanted to play this. This is where the Ukrainian woman, she's on TV, on French TV, and so I'll have to read to you the subtitles, but she clearly shows that Zelensky was not democratically elected, and that really peeved off those that were interviewing her because they thought she was pro-Ukrainian. Listen to what she says. The government is changing non-stop, she says. The economy is tanking, corruption is everywhere. Is she talking about Zelensky? Talking about Zelensky? Of course, who else? So you're saying the democratically elected Zelensky is actually a puppet leader? Yes, and he is by no means a democratic leader. He's banned 4 opposition TV channels. There were also journalists who were mysteriously disappeared. People say the Russian journalists, but Ukrainian journalists are killed too. A lot of journalists have been killed these past few years. It's complicated. It's just that nobody talks about it. It makes no difference. Whoop, hang on. So according to what you said, please let me finish. And they, of course, they cut her off. They wouldn't let her tell the rest of the truth on that. But I just want to throw that in there for you so you could see that. She knew that it wasn't, it wasn't done properly at all. This also, Tiger Droppings says here, discuss briefly the rise of Vladimir Zelensky to the presidency of Ukraine and the sponsorship of Ihor Kolomoisky behind the scenes. Also talks about his role in appointing Hunter Biden to the board of Burisma Holdings. That's what we got right here. Just a little clip there to look at. Leonid Nevzlins, also another Jewish man who was a backer of the neo-Nazi Azov Battalion, says in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and by the way, he actually owns 20% of the stock of Haaretz, they have lost the ability to distinguish between Mogen David and a swastika. Mogen David is the Star of David. On the eve of the inglorious surrender of Mariupol's garrison, in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, was published as an interview with the Sviaslav Palamar, a downright Ukrainian Nazi and deputy commanding officer of the Azov Battalion, in which he compared his downright Nazi battalion with Israeli soldiers. We know that Israel takes the members of its military seriously, who defend your country from both territorial attacks and other terrorists who carry out attacks. The same thing is happening here. I think this is terror. There are many circumstances, but the main reason, as the newspaper Haaretz, under control of the billionaire Leonid Nevzlin, 20% of shares, fugitive Yuko's top manager who was sentenced to abstinence to life imprisonment and is on the wanted list in connection with organizing contract murders, and murder will always understand a war criminal. I mean, it's nuts, right? And what they're talking about, he was wanted for multiple murders, but managed to evade detection there. Anyway, let's continue on. I want you to listen to Max Blumenthal. And Max is a Jewish guy who knows the truth about things that are going on. And this is what I love about the Jewish people that try to tell you the truth in a world of nothing but lies. Listen to what Max has to say.
Israel has confirmed several shipments of arms and tenders for weapon sales to Ukraine.
That's an Israeli-made weapon.
The Azov Battalion has posted photos of its soldiers on its own YouTube channel and social media channels with the Tavor rifle. And the Tavor rifle is one of the most distinctive weapons in the Israeli arsenal. It is the standard issue rifle for Israeli soldiers. And, it was recently used in some of the atrocities committed on the border of Gaza. And it replaced the Uzi, which is another really distinctive Israeli weapon. So there's no mistake here. This is clearly an Israeli weapon, and it reflects what was seen in the Israeli Defense Ministry documents, which were turned up by Israeli human rights lawyers and were obtained by ASA and the Electronic Intifada. And basically, the Israeli Defense Ministry has refused to deny shipping weapons to the Azov Battalion. Well, the reason that they have kind of some plausible deniability about directing weapons to neo-Nazis is that the Azov Battalion has been incorporated into Ukraine's National Guard through the Interior Ministry, which is run by an ultra-right nationalist named Arsen Avakov. So Israel basically just sending weapons to the Ukrainian military, which is now filled with hardcore neo-Nazi ideologues. But there's no disputing the truth of the headline to Asa Winstanley's article. Israel is arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine. The self-proclaimed Jewish state is literally arming neo-Nazis. And that should shock everyone, but at the same time, it's not shocking given Israel's history, which I can kind of briefly explain.
That's unbelievable. I mean, just no doubt, completely unbelievable. This is trying to hide arms exports to neo-Nazi militias in Ukraine. Again, just another article that just shows you that. The Azov Battalion was established in Ukraine following the 2014 Russian invasion of the Crimean Peninsula. It uses well-known National Socialist symbols, while its members use the Nazi salute and carry swastikas in the SS insignia. It is well known that the State of Israel has special commitment to the global struggle against neo-Nazis and anti-Semitism. The petition states, even if there isn't any interest in continuing Israeli security exports to Ukraine, the petitioners believe that the state of Israel cannot take the risk that Israeli weapons and training will be used by neo-Nazis and anti-Semitic soldiers. The state's response included affidavits by top defense ministry officials and rejected the petitions out of hand, saying judicial system has no say in the matters of security exports. The decision regarding the security exports policy clearly fall under the powers of the executive branch, which are made on and basis of consideration that have to do with national security, foreign relations, and international obligations, while safeguarding the vital interests in the state attorney Sarah Bello from Tel Aviv District Attorney's Office wrote in the response. So in other words, they can just take and arm all the neo-Nazis that they want to because it's national security after all. What a complete mess. Anyway, I think that's about as far as we're going to... let me just close it with this one right here. Mercenaries in Ukraine thank Israeli government. That's something I think you need to be able to see as well. And we've played this before, but we'll play it again. It's worth playing again. We want to say a huge thank you to all the Jewish people and to the Israeli government for helping us. We're fighting here against the Russians in this difficult war. Huge thanks. Huge thanks to the main synagogue of Kiev, to the Rabbi Moshe Osman. Huge thanks. Thank you, friend. We want to say thank you to all the Jewish people helping us. We are here for the Ukrainians and for all the people whose lives are now in danger, helping them, fighting for you. We're all here together doing a nice job. Thank you. Thanks to you. Just wanted you to be aware of that there. And this is, of course, they were speaking in the Hebrew language, so it is Israelis that are there fighting on the ground inside of Ukraine. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. Listen, you're watching Israeli News Live. If it comes to your heart to want to support the work we do appreciate it. You can always see our website right there above my head there, how you can donate. And that's Stephen Ben-Nun, P.O. Box 156, Sunbright, Tennessee 37872. Our website is IsraeliNewsLive.org, and you can always just donate online. Thank you for listening. Sorry about all the interruptions there. And finally, the dog decided to lay down, in and out, and lay down. God bless you, and thank you for listening.